Given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and Billy Higgins, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my jazz heroes. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome, everybody, inside the studios of KWFM 1330 The Star. This is a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. We're coming to you live from the studio on Sunday afternoon at 3. My regularly scheduled program is normally a Saturdays at 3. Yeoman's work done by my engineer and station manager to get things up and running today. What was prevalent in the late 60s and early 70s was this jack-of-all-trades mentality when it came to music. What we know today as folk, rock, samba, blaxploitation, jazz, funk, rock, those are all labels. The musicians of the time that I aspired to be in were oblivious to these labels and just wanted to gig and play. If it was a Tom Paxson date, go do it. If it was a Melvin Van Peebles gig, well, let's do that too. How about a bossa session with Joe Beam? Or flying across the world to the Berlin Philharmonic after playing the night before at the Village Vanguard. This was my guest's life. One of adaptability, groove, persistence, execution, and having fun in whatever shapes and sizes. Herb Bushler, it's an honor to welcome you to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hello.
Hey, you know, can we just go in and talk about that a little bit? Talk about when you first got to New York and what the scene was like, and how you, and the fact that there were no labels when you went there.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say I think that was a great introduction, man. I mean, I was looking behind me to see who you're talking about, you know?
Well, yeah, but that's a values thing in our society, because the unsung heroes are the session cats. I think you were the one that told me, you said, you know, there's only about 200 of us. I don't know, somebody said that to me, and it's true. It's like, it
was a small community. That's absolutely right. I mean, and what your question was? What was the scene like back then?
Well, first of all, tell me about you growing up and your influences and sort of your classical learnings and then outside the box learnings. How did that come about?
Well, I studied piano when I was a kid, and I wanted to play in a band though. So when in high school, in junior high school. I think they call that middle school now, but in junior high school, I wanted to be in a band, and I walked in, and the band director said, "What do you play?" I said, "I play piano." So he put a John Philip Sousa march in front of me, and he said, "Okay, play that." And I played it on the piano. He said, "I've got just the thing for you." The next thing I knew, I was holding a tuba. Because that's what he needed.
Of course. It's very self-centered.
Right. So, and from tuba, realizing the limitations of the instrument as far as, you know, its dexterity and its solo capacity, and also the orchestral repertoire for it, I sort of gravitated to upright bass from there. Took some lessons, but I was basically self-taught. And I lived for classical music only until I realized the limitations of classical music and the fact of, there's just a limited amount of creativity that comes with it. And if you want to be creative on any instrument, you got to go to jazz sooner or later.
Hey, you know, I just have to tell you, this was a great story. So we know the Jake Feinberg Show is supposed to air Saturdays at 5 Eastern, 3 Mountain. Herb was nice enough to make time today because, you know, things didn't work out so well technologically here. I swear to you, Herb, this is the kind of spirituality that I'm dealing with now, is that I leave the station after all that, I go to a local bookstore, and I pull out, what do I find? A Tom Paxson album I've never seen before with Herb Bushler on electric and acoustic bass. Dave Bromberg was on it, Jimmy Madison was on it, Richard Davis was on it. I said, you know what? This is just meant to be. So it's talk a little bit about the scene. Talk about the scene when you got, you turned on to more music with more space and more flexibility, and then you wound up, was New York your first stop in your career?
Well, yeah, New York is always the first stop.
Right, you have to prove it there.
Back in those days.
Right.
That was the stop. I mean, everybody I knew from Cleveland was living in New York.
What were some of the hip? But Cleveland had a pretty hip scene, though, right? I mean, there was.
Yes, it did. But every musician I knew from Cleveland was working in New York. Everybody wanted to come to New York to make it, because that was where it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I consider myself very lucky to have been part of that era. I mean, now it's a whole different scene, or practically no scene at all. But back then. I don't know how to put it, there was a spirit, there was an ambient, there was a drive. Things were happening everywhere. Musicians were working everywhere. There were clubs on every street. There were 3 or 4 recording studios on every block. There were so many things happening, and even your competition wasn't really your competition, because there was enough work to go around. Mm-hmm. Everybody did everything.
It was very well put. Actually, I'm going to throw this one at you. I haven't asked any of my guests this, but based on the fact of the interview I did with Ed Neumeister, he was, I think, tell me if I'm wrong or not, but the clubs, was there more organized crime, more mafias, people that owned these clubs? Because now it seems much more square. And to me, at that time, it was looser. I mean, Ed Neumeister played at a strip club in the Tenderloin in San Francisco with Mark Levine. They were playing 20-minute standards while the girls were stripping. And what I say to myself is, there were so many clubs. There was so much access, and like you said, so much work to go around. It strikes me as not of today's capitalistic structure. Who was in charge of those venues?
Well, they were basically entrepreneurs. I mean, guys like Joe and Iggy Trimini, who owned the 5 Spot. I mean, that was where Monk did a lot of his live recordings, and the guys of the Half Note, Max Gordon, who owned the Vanguard. I mean, he originally owned Cafe Society downtown, but the Vanguard, I think the Vanguard is still there. I mean, my God, I mean, Joe Farrell and Joe Beck and Steve Gadd and I lived at the Vanguard for, I don't know how many, times we played there. And Bradley Cunningham, that was a university place in the city. There were places in the bottom, and those were smaller venues. Bigger venues were like the Bottom Line. And places were all over town.
The Village Gate and...
the Village Gate. Well, yeah, that's right. That was a huge place. That was a huge barn-like structure. I worked there. That's right. I worked there back in the 60s,
Where were you living when you moved to New York, and were you hanging out? Were you living?
I was living on the Lower East Side.
My favorite area. I know at that time it was. I know it was very seedy at that time.
That was before it was called the East Village. It was basically East Slum back then. It's $43.53 a month. I even remember my landlord's name. The guy's name was Snare.
I mean, the whole thing was just. It doesn't seem like it was real. I mean, and although it was too real to be real. And I guess, but what appealed to you? I mean, aside from the rent, I know it was cheap, but the atmosphere there was loose, and it allowed your mind to be more open-minded for when you went into the sessions?
This is the way it worked, Jake. If you were lucky enough to have the job at a club, right,
mm-hmm.
you knew that you were not going to be playing the last set. Because in the last set, before the last set started, there would be these musicians coming in the back door or the back of the club. There'd be at least 3 or 4 bass players with their basses. There would be drummers who had their sticks, in their pockets, and there would be trumpet players, trombone players, sax players. And the people I felt the sorriest for were the piano players, because they couldn't bring their own piano. They were at the mercy of whatever horrible piece of, vicious ivory was sitting on the bandstand.
Exactly.
But you knew that was the last set was going to last at least about 2 hours because that was when everybody sat in. That's the way you learned your trade back then.
And there was clearly it was a pecking order too. I mean, you got in line behind the elder statesman.
You got in line, but it was also what you call like a cut session. In other words, somebody would get up on the bandstand and stomp off Cherokee, at a ridiculously hard tempo, and it might have been 5 degrees outside, and your fingers can't even move.
Mm-hmm.
And that would separate the men from the boys pretty quickly.
Wow, unbelievable.
So that's the way you learned. But unfortunately, that environment is gone. There's no place where you can learn how to play anymore.
Why did that experiential learning go away?
Just the same reason the whole business has changed. I mean, that it's just the environment isn't there anymore. Things change, music changes, language changes. The word blog didn't exist back then.
Well, let me also say that I think, in general, generations like myself and other even younger generations have stopped playing instruments. In general, I mean, it used to, when you talk about the drummers coming in with their sticks,
yep.
and people being at the mercy of the ivory, however crappy it was. The point is, people took pride in that. It was a hobby. It was more than a hobby. It was a passion that you, if you prayed hard enough and got some breaks, you could turn into a living. But that
it was a passion because you wanted to play the music, and it was a passion enough for you to get out there at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning when you knew the last set was going to be at a certain club, and knew that you would fight your way to sit in to play at least one tune.
And then it didn't hurt that the country was still flush with money, and also you had the civil rights movement, and you had sort of an Afrocentric awareness, and also the ability, like we talked about with Joe Chambers, where that guy would just pick you up. You were a scrawny kid, and he'd just pick you up and crunch you, but you guys played awesome. I mean, I was listening to that stuff we'll get into it later from the '73, and it was a beautiful melting pot of music goes beyond. It goes to the deep innards of everybody, the emotional tenor of the person. It has nothing to do with the color of their skin.
Well, if there's no emotional value in music, then it's not worth listening to.
As Kenny Barron said, he goes, jazz is now played with the head and not with the heart.
Yeah. Have you that's when I'll tell you something. I got to give you a compliment. I love your show because when you get to be my age and approaching my mid-70s, most of the people, or a lot of people that I played with, aren't here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to your show, I've been able to see that there's still a bunch of them around.
And I'll tell you that, yeah. And actually, there are more than I ever would have thought in my life, and there are still cats like Horace Silver and Donald Byrd. They're still around, but I mean, they're even in a different area and may not be accessible for an interview per se. But this is an honor for me because to be able to go back and be able to shift consciousness and through the values and the sort of ideals and the work ethic and the passion that you guys had. I'm doing this is my way of waving a sign on the side of the road. So I mean, we could talk to Herb Bushler all day long, but I did want to place a couple clips of music here. One in particular, we're going to start with. Take a listen to it, and we'll come back. All right?
Sure.
and a good buddy of mine, friend of the show, Dick Burke on drums, Bill Barron on saxophone, Herb Bushler on bass. It's ironic, I'm reading a review here for what it's worth, and they say the title track doesn't live up to its potential. I thought it sounded okay.
Well, it was the first record I ever made in my life. It was back in 1964, and I had gone to Europe. Actually, you remember the interview you did with Warren Smith?
Sure.
Okay, well, he was my mentor, and he actually loaned me the money to get there, because that was back in the days that once you got over there, they would give you work, but they didn't want to pay your airfare.
Wow, you had to find you to get over there.
Yeah. Once you're over there, you can get some work. And we recorded that in Paris in 1964 after working around Copenhagen and Norway and Stockholm and then Berlin and then down to Paris. And we recorded that session there. And Bill Barron he's no longer with us, I believe, but he's Kenny Barron's brother.
Wow, right? I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I was actually curious, how did Ted decide to choose the players for this session?
The ones who could pay their way over.
I love it.
Sorry. I'd love to say, it was really a matter of talent.
Well, no, but it's a diverse crew, and in fairness to the All Music Review, the entire album smokes. It's one that I haven't gotten my hands around because I'm so steeped in the early '70s. You know, I wanted to play this other track, at least the beginning of it, and come back and just ask you a couple quick questions about it. Okay?
Sure. Go ahead.
That was Icarus, Paul Winter Consort. But my question for you, Herb, is, was that you playing the bow at the beginning? I mean, I know you're playing the da-da, but at the beginning was that you on the bow?
No, that's a cello player named David Darling.
Okay, so can you before we go to the news break, talk a little bit about Paul Winter? You dealt with so many kind of heavy guys, and what was the?
Well, that was a pretty heavy guy because that record was, they rented a mansion in Marblehead, Massachusetts for us to record this, and they built a recording studio into this mansion, and they brought over. Remember now, this is like 1970,
69,
like 71,
yeah. 69.
60, yeah, and they brought over George Martin to produce it.
Wow, that's a good deal. You got put up in a mansion for a few days.
Well, to show you what I said, who's George Martin? Yeah, I didn't listen to a lot of the. I listened to the Beatles records, but I didn't realize what a driving force he was.
Right.
And he was a terrific guy, man. He's like the hippest English gentleman in the world. He is so knowledgeable. He brought his own engineer with him, a guy named Bill Price. And they had this huge mansion, and they put the studio in a conservatory part, and then they put the studio in itself, and the recording, the control room in the conservatory and the studio in the living room. And they had a video hookup so he could watch us while we were playing. And working with him was just a joy. I mean, he was really a really wonderful experience. And it was, they rented houses for us to live in. And they also recorded another group there called C Train, which was some kind of rock group that lasted for about, as they say in the commercial business, 30 seconds with a ring out,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. That was the folk rock group with Richard Green.
I guess. I'll take your word for it.
All right.
They were here, then they weren't.
And they were not. All right, well, listen, Herb, sit tight. We're going to go to a news break, come back and do a whole lot more. We're going to talk about some heavy cats.
Cats, man.
Heavy
all right,
cats.
So,
we'll be right back. You're listening to the Jake Feinberg Show on KWFM 1330.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be right back.
CNN Radio, I'm Edgar Tragitz. More violence in Afghanistan, apparently connected to the burning of Qurans last week. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh says a number of U.S. service members were injured today in the northern part of the country outside a base there.
About 400 protesters gathered. A hand grenade was apparently thrown by them, injuring 7 American Special Forces soldiers, according to Afghan police, who were subsequently evacuated. We understand this was entirely related to the Quran burning.
Yesterday, a gunman killed 2 U.S. military officers inside the country's Ministry of Interior. It's been a week and a half, but Mitt Romney is back on top in a new national survey. The latest Gallup daily tracking poll gives Romney a 31 to 29% edge on Rick Santorum. The GOP Michigan and Arizona primaries are Tuesday. There will be no racing today in Daytona because of rain. Stock Car's biggest race is postponed until noon tomorrow. The most trusted name in news, this is CNN Radio.
As a proud father of 5 daughters, I knew someday the wedding bells would be ringing my wallet dry. So in order to save some money, I decided that all of their special days would be on the same day.
I can't believe this.
Can't believe what? I've been engaged for 10 years waiting for you.
It's only because you took the first one to come along.
Take that back. Justin's a good man.
Girls, this is no time to bicker. It's go time, ladies.
There's an easier way to save. Get online. Go to geico.com. Get a quote. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
I'm talking with Dr. Frank Pompey, founder of the Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer. How would you define the quality of the scanner?
The temporal scanner is the only thermometer that has been rigorously tested by thousands of hospitals with more than 40 peer-reviewed published studies attesting to its accuracy.
What about the value of the product?
The peace of mind from knowing that your family's health is well protected is priceless.
The Exergen Temporal Scanner, changing the way the world takes temperature. Available at Supercenters and Sam's Club and other fine retailers.
Mike Rowe here with Jim Twitchell. Jim, what are you?
I'm a senior master technician.
You've been with Ford now for how long?
24 years, thankfully.
Jim, a lot of people hear about the works and they figure it's an oil change. It is an oil change, right?
No, Mike, it's not just an oil change.
Please proceed.
Well, it includes a brake inspection, belt and hoses check, checking your cabin filter, your air filter, tire rotation, battery test, top off all the fluids, and a multi-point inspection with a detailed report card.
All right, it certainly seems comprehensive, this works thing. What doesn't it include?
Well, that list is probably very short.
Glove compartment, you check that?
We try to stay out of your glove box.
What about my antenna?
Come see the experts at your local Ford dealer for a great value on routine service. The Works Fuel Saver package covers everything you need for just $29.95 or less after $10 rebate. Stop by today.
If we were to sum up, you'd say the Works Fuel Saver package includes pretty much everything for one low price.
It'll cover everything that your car needs for a scheduled maintenance service.
Up to 5 quarts oil, taxes, diesel, and disposal fees extra. See participating Ford dealer or visit FordOwner.com for rebate details through 3/31/12.
Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. One of the first things I wanted to do when I moved to Tucson was find authentic Chinese cuisine. After a tip from the Chinese Student Association, I headed over to Badar Chinese Restaurant. Well, it's been 7 years, and I have never looked back. Located at 7321 East Broadway Boulevard, Badar has been a family-run operation since 1992. The award-winning chef produces succulent dishes from sizzling ginger chicken to salt and pepper shrimp. The thing that separates Badar from the rest is that the chef procures ancient oriental dishes with the exotic island flair of Taiwan. Most importantly, there are no gimmicks or razzle-dazzle at Badar. You won't find any flat-screen TVs or karaoke machines. Badar is a place to go enjoy good food and spend time with your family. It exudes peace and tranquility after a long week of work. So come down and check out Baodar Chinese Restaurant. Hong Hao Chu. It's that good. Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. When it came time to decide where to buy my daughter a piano last year, the choice was easy. We got it at Hackenberg & Sons Piano Company. Located at 4333 East Broadway Boulevard, Hackenberg & Sons is Tucson's longest-running family-owned piano business. Run by three brothers and a son, they pride themselves on superior instruments and customer satisfaction. It's why they've been around so long. And it's why their pianos are used at the University of Arizona, Pima Community College, and many other prestigious institutions. So whether it's for your child, business, or yourself, when you buy a piano, make sure you go to Hackenberg & Sons. It'll be the beginning of a long-lasting partnership. For more information, visit them at hackenbergpiano.com.
Even the ancient Romans knew that music can soothe the savage beast. But what if there's a beast lurking in your old stereo? Maybe it's popping static, garbled distortion, a skip in the record, or worse, dead silence. Stereo Hospital can restore smooth sound to your receiver, amp, turntable, CD player, or speakers. At the same Midtown location, 4044 East Speedway, for 10 years, Stereo Hospital might be the last shop in town doing quick, guaranteed repairs on vintage and modern stereos. Owner Jeff Brucker has over 40 years' experience as an electronic technician, and he is happy to bring back the joy and memories only your music collection provides. Log on to stereohospital.com or call 722-4610, or just bring that mean old stereo in today. Stereo Hospital at 4044 East Speedway, inside Metronome Music near Alvernon, to calm the beast.
In this day and age, people have a lot to protect. You want to know that when you're insuring valuable goods, you have an agent you can trust. Craig Pretzinger is that agent. For auto, home, and life insurance, the Pretzinger Agency is Tucson's most honest and flexible insurance company. Have off-road vehicles or motorhomes? Pretzinger can cover that as well. Pretzinger Agency at 299-5810, located across the street from Sullivan's Steakhouse on the southwest corner of River and Camp. Trust, compassion, and service. The whole package at Pretzinger Agency. Call 299-5810 or text QUOTE to 602-459-5533 to receive a no-obligation quote. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Be a part of a new coalition with Jake Feinberg. The second half of my show starts right now. Welcome back to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, live here at KWFM 1330 The Star. And I wanted to welcome back in legendary bass player Herb Bushler, trying to reinvigorate his memory. Herb, how you doing?
I'm here.
Good, good. You know, I wanted to take me back to the phone call when you got a call saying we want you to come in and do a little soundtrack for Melvin Van Peebles.
Okay.
So, in essence, you know, this track we're about to hear, was it off a soundtrack that he did, or how did you get that? How did you get that call? Why would you get that call?
Well, Melvin knew Warren Smith, and he knew another friend of mine named Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, who was a monster composer, and he wanted to do an album, and he just went up to A&M Records, I believe it was, and just pitched it to them, because Melvin is like, he was. I think he's still around, isn't he? I mean, he directed what was that movie, Watermelon Man, with Godfrey Cambridge?
Yeah, he was all over. No, it's just I wanted to know the connection because, and I've been neglecting this, but it really goes back to this idea of Warren Smith, Joe Chambers, Don Elias. These percussionists were like blood brothers to you.
Yeah, well, Warren was more so because Warren was my mentor. He would call me up and say, "Okay, you want to know about recording?" I said, "I'm going to do a session. So you want to come with me?" I said, "Sure." And he was a commensurate percussionist. I mean, percussionist for a lot of people means that you hit things with a stick, but it really means that you're able to play four-mallet marimba tune and play timpani and also hit things with a stick, you know.
Exactly.
And Warren was in demand everywhere. So he sort of took me under his wing and showed me. I'd just go to sessions with him and see how it worked. because it was an education that I tried a couple of times to bring people with me, to show them. But it was a very special relationship that we had.
It's so confounding to me. There was just this I don't even know if it was considered in the early 70s, was there a loft scene there? I mean, Gene Perla told a great story of Don Elias jumping on a bus in Providence and coming down to an apartment down in the West Side, I think he just moved into, and then unbeknownst to him, he got a phone call or the doorbell rang, and there's Chick Corea and Joe Farrell standing in the doorway. And I'm like, Herb must have basically been. I mean, this was and there were these jam sessions. I'm like, how great is that? These titans of music, and they're just. To me, you guys didn't need a lot of pomp and circumstance. You just wanted to play music. I mean, that's really what you were passionate about.
That's what it was. And that's why jazz is such a terrific idiom to play music in, because it's creative. I mean, I've been through this with a lot of people before, saying that you can't really consider. I don't consider an orchestral musician playing Mozart's G minor symphony creative, because Mozart did it. Mm-hmm. And he's been dead for a long time. So all they can do is interpret it. Jazz is the only music that there is where you make the music up on the spot, and it's new and it's fresh.
To me, I mean, being a radio broadcaster, I know how to, push and pull, know when to cut questions, know when to veer off into different directions. And the same thing in music, where you guys, what it is coming up spontaneously with ideas, creative ideas after ideas after ideas. And hopefully that happens. Sometimes you fall flat on your,
Of
course. I mean, listen, you can't do a perfect interview every time. It's true. But I know what you mean, and it's not, you can't rely back, because you can't sit back and rest on the fact and say, okay, I know this because it's been done before. You're constantly trying to create something new and fresh, and that's the point. Let's take a listen to this Melvin Van Peebles track, just to show you the versatility of the man we're dealing with today.
Okay.
Look at yourself. You big ugly mule-faced mule. You got the nerve to try and cry. Man, would you get away from that door? I'm in here now. I ain't through. Don't you blink. You look straight back at me. And you got the nerve to have some kind of crocodile tear in your eye. You sure is dumb. Ain't no fool like an old fool. They say. And you better believe it. Mirror, mirror on the wall. You ever seen a bigger fool than me? How come she went away? You might as well put that thing down. Shaving is all you gonna do. You shucking and I know it. Just a minute, I done said. I'll be right out. I told you. 19 ain't all that young. Maybe if I'd gotten a new sheen. I know Goldberg would have staked me. Good as I ever been. Could still shake them down with anybody. Just 'cause I don't want to act a fool all night long, don't mean I can't. I can. She could have said goodbye, dog, though. Mirror, mirror on the wall. You ever seen a bigger fool than me? How come she went away? Youngsters just ain't got no respect for the elders these days. Damn it, man! This toilet don't belong to just you. You knock on this door one more time before I'm through. I'm gonna show you what knocking can do. Sure, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. But anybody can feel poorly for a month or two. She just weren't no good. Call them chippies in my day. Fast. Gonna end up on 57th and Broadway. Long as you're to the point down when you walk, remember what you see. Mirror, mirror on the wall. You ever seen a bigger fool than me?
Shaving is all you're going to do today. I mean, that is...
You know, that's true.
I mean, it's great.
How many times have you looked in the mirror and said, you ever seen a bigger fool than me?
You know what I love the most is that, you know, he was calling your bluff. He was calling people's bluff, saying, you know, everyone is human, and even me. And that's the problem in our society now. We have a lot of people running around acting as if they are somehow, they're just not acting like human beings. They're acting like they're being forced to say things and contort themselves and not be themselves. And that is hurting our society gravely at this point. So guys like Melvin, you know, there's not enough people looking in the mirror like he was.
Well, it was an interesting thing to do, for as far as I was concerned, was to put that kind of poetry, you know, sing, speak, sprechsing, I think they call it in German, you know,
right.
You know, into a form, and that was, by the way, that was Warren Smith playing drums on that, and Coleridge Perkinson playing piano, me on bass, and a guy named Al Gibbons playing tenor sax, and Nathan Woodard was playing trumpet, and Howard Johnson was playing bari sax, I believe.
That's my next man is Hojo. I got to get Howard Johnson, because what a classic, again, just a nice conglomeration, and it was so loose, and you heard, you know, Melvin using his voice as an instrument, and then you could hear you guys pick up the tempo once in a while when he would get fired up. It was a real slithery, and I don't know, walking out at the best you can, when you walked out of sessions that required you to really think, that require, you know, not necessarily jazz sessions. I mean, they could have been loose sort of, soundtrack sessions, or they could have been folk or whatever we know as labels today. When you walked out of a session that really made you think, how did you feel? Were you exhausted? Were you enlightened? What did you do?
Well, when you go into a recording session, you got to be ready to do anything. You know, mm-hmm. I mean, that's where it's at. You don't know what it's going to be. You get a call. To do a session. I remember once I was in a bar with, where musicians would hang out in between dates. You know, sometimes, Jake, you sort of get the feeling, or I sort of get the feeling that I'm like an aging Tyrannosaurus being interviewed by a paleontologist, you know. There might be a question like, is it true that some dinosaurs had a wholly liquid diet?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want you to look at it like that. I would look at it more in the idea that that we have in 40 years we've aged so much. That's the reality. And my mind, no one's going to really convince me otherwise. In music, that there was a cutoff date, and I like things got for whatever reason, I don't want to get into it. I really don't want to get derailed, and I don't want you to feel old. What I do want you to...
that's very nice of you.
What I do
is that I am. That's the way it is.
But you are. But I mean, this is going to bring a smile to the face of guys like the distinguished professor at UNC Wilmington, Joe Chambers, who, when I just brought up your name, I mean, he just almost jumped out of his chair. And so for you to be able to articulate this stuff...
as long as he didn't try to beat me up, that's a big dude, man.
No, and he's coming on the program real soon. I'm glad we're doing it over the radio.
He's a great drummer, man. I love playing with him. He had a way of playing drums that I've worked with a lot of terrific drummers. I worked with him. I worked with Steve Gadd. I worked with Tony Williams. I worked with Buddy Rich, and Joe had one of these loose kind of like approach to the drums. It was all there, but it didn't. It looked effortless, So
I love the Roy Brooks, just like real like fluid. Just everything was.
Oh yeah, it was, but it was all there. And there was the articulation was perfect. So
it's really awe-inspiring, actually in some degree. I want to. You're really Jimmy Madison and I had a great conversation, but I really wanted you to talk about Joe Beck. I was reading an article. What I love about Beck is that he had a cow. He was a dirt farmer. He was a farmer.
Oh yeah, he was into that, man.
And he had his cows.
He was up there. Like when I went up to see his farm in Albany. He had this dairy farm. It put me off in milk for a week.
Yeah, that was back when milk.
Man, I said, they had conveyor belts, behind the cows to take, what away, I said, man, this is awful.
But
I don't want a hamburger. I don't want milk or anything, I'm a vegetarian.
When you we talked about it previously, but I wanted you to talk about it for history's sake. When you got into that sort of early 70s period, that 73 period, you and Joe Beck had a name for that kind of music.
Yeah, we did. That's fusion rock. That. Yeah, it was called fusion rock, but Joe and I called it confusion rock.
Confusion rock. That's my
confusion.
All right, I'm Joe. If Joe's listening somewhere, I'm co-opting that. I love that.
Well, the first time I ever met Joe was at a Gil Evans session. We were both called for Gil. And I think Joe, weighed about 125, and I think I weighed about 123.
You were eating
this is going back a ways.
Yeah.
And he was wearing one of those illegal ping pong shirts,
Oh, yeah.
You know what those are?
If I saw it, I'd know it.
Okay, well, what it is it's a polka dot shirt with white polka dots the size about an inch and a half.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So if you're playing ping pong with somebody, all you see is ping pong balls whenever you look at a guy,
that would drive... I do... yeah, right on. So, yeah, at the session.
And we got along, from the first time we ever met. That was at a Gil Evans session in 1960-something. I'm sorry, but my memory... I'm trying to remember yesterday, so this is a long, long, long time ago. And we remained friends for many, 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 many years, and... he was just one of a really close friend, and we worked together for a lot of groups. We would go into Bradley's, just he and I playing duo for like 3-4 weeks at a time.
You know what? I'm going to just go out on a limb right now and say Gryphon. I think that was the name of the record company. Released an album from Bradley's, and it was Joe Beck and Red Mitchell, who I love. But man, I wish it was Bushler instead of Mitchell that day.
Well, Joe and I did a bunch of stuff together. We did 3 records with CTI together.
You don't worry. Listen, I'll get over it in about 2 minutes. What I wanted to. Did you know the name Jack Kleinsinger?
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember.
Jack Kleinsinger, he was a jazz promoter. He was also the district attorney of New York. And he told me in 1973 he started his promotion. And the first concert he promoted was you and Joe Beck, Joe Farrell, and Steve Gadd, or maybe it was Jimmy Madison on drums. I'm not sure. in 1973, his first concert. So, and he had your name in the Union Guide, and I called you up, and sure enough, I got Herb Bushler, and I said, you know what? Let's make sure before we wrap up this interview that we crank something hard from 1973. And so let's do that, and we'll come back.
Go ahead, man.
All right.
Group has come direct from the Village Vanguard to the Berlin Philharmonic. At the drums, Steve Gadd. On bass, Herb Bushler. Guitar, Joe Beck. Reeds and flute, Joe Farrell.
Sounds like a much larger piece band than just a four-piece band.
Pardon me?
It sounds like a much larger band, not just four pieces. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. That was a great band. You know, Steve, he had just gotten out of the Air Force, I believe, and he was living in Rochester. And it was just before he really got into being what he was going to be doing for the rest of his life, you know.
Right.
And a lot of people don't really know how good a jazz player he is. I mean, they've seen him behind, you know, Paul Simon and all the rest of the rock and the pop groups. But this guy can play. You know?
Yeah, I only know him in the jazz context. I mean, I think a lot of people... What I wanted to say was, you know, we have about 2 minutes left. Could you just tell the story about the Vanguard going across the other side of the world?
Oh, okay. Well, I was up in Rochester doing a symphonic piece with David Amram. And we were recording it, playing concerts and recording it up in Rochester. And before I took the gig, I told Amram that I had this, you know, commitment to the Berlin Jazz Festival by George Gruntz, who runs the place. And I got a sub to do a concert for me. So I flew from Rochester to New York to Frankfurt to Berlin. The reason you couldn't fly all the way to Berlin was because the Tempelhof was only good enough for prop planes, you know. So you had to take a jet to Frankfurt and then a prop plane to Berlin. And then I took a cab from Berlin to the concert hall with Beck, Farrell, and Gadd and we played for 45 minutes, and then I flew I went back to the airport in Berlin, flew from Berlin to Frankfurt to London to New York to Rochester, finished the gig, and then came back to New York all in 2 days.
Animals, pure and utter animals, and we're really glad that you guys made the music and people were there to record it, and I'm here to archive it and celebrate it. Herb Bushler, thank you so much for being part of the program, man.
Been my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
You got it. This is the Jake Feinberg on KWFM 1330, The Star.